back to Podcast Recovery, everyone. We're your hosts, David O.
And Eric V.
And Carly R.
Today, we're joined by our very special guest, Richard. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, man. So where are you from, Richard?
I live in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm originally from Alberta, which is the next province over, but I've been living in Vancouver for a few years now.
Nice. So when were you first introduced to recovery?
Well, I hit bottom in the fall of 2009. I had been introduced to recovery by some friends that were sober over the years, but of course they were mistaken, and so I, give them too much credence for what they were saying. Spoiler alert, they were right. They were correct.
Nice. So how long have you been sober?
I'm into my 11th year. My sobriety date is December 27th, 2009.
Awesome. All right. Well, with all that out of the way, we're going to turn it over to you to share your story with us. So take it away.
Sure. My name is Richard, and I'm an alcoholic. I began my life as the youngest of 4 children. My father and mother were both school teachers. My father was the principal of the high school that I grew up in the town that I grew up in, and there was only one high school, and it was a large high school, Compson High School, so everybody in town knew my father, and within not too many school years after we moved there, for him to take that job, they also knew me. And so my place in the world as a public person or someone that was under scrutiny began very early. And so the whole part of my life where, that we often live two lives, that's sort of when that began, is that the appearance of me and my role in my family was more important than what was actually going on. I can, say without too much embarrassment that I had a mentally ill grandmother who mistreated me when I was very young, and I didn't really know or understand that impact on my life until much later. As it turned out, my grandmother committed suicide when I was about 5 and a half. So the fact that she had been, mentally ill and had been, attacked me when I was like 2 and a half, became part of the sort of family shame. And so I didn't really understand, nor was there a lot of understanding of my behaviors, which where I would have these sort of blackout rages, and I would go into a great deal of, like catatonic, virtually disassociation when I felt like I was in trouble because of what that experience. And, I've just turned 60 years old, so we're talking about a time period in the world where mothers were left at home to take care of their children, and there was no concept of getting any kind of outside help, or that I was just perceived as a bad boy, and so I was punished rather frequently with the wooden spoon all the way through my early childhood, and all of that seemed to be fine with everyone, including me. In fact, the joke in my family joked that Wiki got more spankings than all the other kids put together. I wore that almost as a badge of honor. It wasn't until I had a child of my own and looked down into her, sweet little face and realized that the person that we were talking about that wasn't hit with a stick as much as he deserved was a toddler. And I'm still at a bit of a loss as to the thinking that could go behind that. Being, the spoil the rod, spare the child kind of thing, I suppose. And as, as we know, boys are more likely to sustain this kind of physical abuse. And very often that is not viewed as a problem. It just is the way it was. And for all sorts of people, it wasn't a problem. That's just, sort of what happened. But I was, a super sensitive little kid, and it made me sick, right? And it wasn't until I got help for post-traumatic stress in the form of a thing called EMDR, eye movement displacement reprocessing, which is a way of processing trauma, that I was able to forgive myself for not being weird or evil or crazy, but simply sick. And that is one of the things that one of the gifts of recovery is the opportunity to take away all of the protective layers that I was putting on with alcohol and drugs and all the other, sort of numbing things that we do in order to actually get a clear view of what happened. And then, to be able to move on from that. Like Buddha said, if you're shot with an arrow, what difference does it make who shot it or why? The point is to get the arrow out. And so for a lot of my recovery has been a process of learning to be able to let go of things, and realizing that my hanging on to stuff was my part in a lot of these things, and that it was my not my opportunity, but also my responsibility to be able to accept that the story that I was telling myself of being this betrayed, abandoned little boy may have been true at some point, but was no longer, and that I was a grown man who had his head up his butt, and that was the real story. So I went to university. I was bright. I was able to get good marks without trying too hard. I found a great deal of identity in the idea of being a party machine. So, there was even at university when people would see me at the library and not the pub going, "What are you doing here?" And me thinking that was pretty cool. And so when I got out of university and I had a degree in education, so I was going to be a school teacher, but there was massive unemployment in that area, in that education, and and I had a degree in English and drama, so I'd been performing since I was a little boy. So stand-up comedy was going on. It was sort of a new thing in the mid-'80s, and I tried it out, and it turned out that I had a natural affinity for that. And I found a job that not only were you allowed to drink on the job, you were encouraged to. there's not too many jobs that you can go to where when you show up for work, your boss offers you a drink and thinks it's weird if you don't accept it. And, so I spent the next few decades drinking my way across the, comedy circuit. And, and bar owners liked it. Alcoholism presents in all sorts of different ways. With me, I could drink a ton. So some people are sloppy and falling all over the place. Me, I could function. It turned out you're supposed to throw up and pass out and stumble, but I didn't, and so people didn't think that I was alcoholic. They thought I was an asshole, and and it was, and there's arguably some people that still believe that. But that's not for me to help them with. That's something they're going to do on their own. But, the opportunity to go into clubs and, get the free drinks and challenge the audience to buy me drinks and be able to outdrink the audience and have the ring out of the cash register at the end of the night be, double what it normally is because of the promotion of drinking that I did with my show made a living for me. And, I was popular and worked those circuits a lot. The interesting thing is that, people don't know what's going on from one day to the next. Sometimes I would show up in a town and my friends from university or other people would come out to see the show and we, party, and have a wild time. And the next day, as they're sweeping the glass off their driveway and taking, crap from their wife because of that, Rick showed up and we had a crazy time. And then they would, go back to their lives and maybe not, go to the bar or have another drink for weeks or months. Meanwhile, the next night, I was in the next town doing the same thing. And so it was having its effect, but it was going undetected and just became, part of my shtick. My last CD, I have a dozen comedy CDs, and the last one before I got sober was called At Least There's Drinking. And so my whole attitude was that life was like a kind of a weak, a boring party, but at least there was a bar. And, that was sort of my catchphrase. I would make some social comment, then I'd go, well, at least there's drinking, and then I'd take another shot of Jack. And it didn't occur to me that there was anything wrong with this. And to be honest, it didn't occur to the people around me either. I remember I was in Toronto with my crew, and I was, now in my 40s, my crew were in their late 20s. We're sitting in a bar one night after all of it. We're, partying it up, and I turned to one of those young guys that was, hanging out with me, and I said to him, hey, I'm doing pretty good keeping up with you young fellas. He said, keeping up? Keeping up? You are a leader. So, and of course, we need younger and younger people because the people my age were not surviving me, right? When I made an amends to an ex-girlfriend, a few years ago, she said to me that she tried to be alcoholic. She tried to stay with me, but she just couldn't up to what she described as my lethal tolerance to alcohol, right? That I had such a capacity to drink that it was, deadly to anyone that tried to stick with it and stay with that plan. And And it didn't occur to me. That's one of the wonderful things about making amends is that it takes care of your step one for you. If you have, one every now and then we go, well, wasn't that big of a deal, and all that kind of stuff. I remember making amends to a guy for, being mad at him for 20 years about some slight I had felt from him. And how counterintuitive the steps are in that, we don't make a list of the people that we've hurt. We make a list of the people that we're mad at. And so when I was able to, talk to him about, that I had held this grudge against him all this time, he went, oh, I always enjoyed our conversations and even the more, confrontational level of our conversations, except when you'd had a few too many. You just threw that in at the end. Except for those times. Okay, so this is a caveat for Richard Lett. This is a contingency with me, is that it was going to be okay unless on those occasions when I'd had a few too many, right? And I just like it still makes the hair on my arm stand up that was part of being around me, was that there was a chance that I might be, hammered and a jerk. And I was oblivious to that, right? And so when you do, make those, amends to people, they don't know the gold that they're giving you when they just make a little reflection like that, to go, oh, so that I can wake up the next day and say, I'm Richard and I'm an alcoholic and I need to get to a meeting now, right? Instead, because, this is the only disease I know of that tries to convince you that you don't have it, like I went through cancer, right? And cancer doesn't say to you, stay away from on-call, just whatever you do, do not check that lump again, right? You're fine. No, it doesn't do that, right? But alcoholism, drug addiction, one of those people, why are they so uptight, Sure, I crashed the car, but, who doesn't, And, and so, so that was what I was like. Then a rather epic thing happened. I saw, I basically saw a murder. There was a shooting outside of a comedy club in Vancouver. It was a gang shooting, and I didn't see the shooting. I just saw the man. Everyone was rushing back into the club while I was walking out. I was drunk, and I just sort of saw the guy in the middle of the road, and I watched his soul leave his body. And I didn't care. And when the police came and took the real witnesses away, and the media showed up, and they interviewed me, and I was drunk, and I said, obviously he's dead. Do you hear any ambulances coming? And, I invited darkness in, and it came in. And from that point on, this is in, November of 2009, I became psychotic. I lost grip. I was out of money and out of booze and out of friends all at the same time, and it wasn't a coincidence. And when that happens, and we know that withdrawal from alcohol is an extremely physiologically dangerous thing. There's, arguably Amy Winehouse died not from drinking, but from not drinking. And so when we go into that withdrawal, which is what I did, I became psychotic, and I began running away from this gang. And I was in my car for 5 weeks, and and I had a bottle of Chivas in my trunk, because that's how much of a douchebag I was, that I had like, to prove to myself that I wasn't alcoholic, I had to drive around with $85 scotch in my trunk, right? And December 26th, 2009, I got really mad and I drank it, right? We know how this story ends. I drank it. And, very often when we go on 12-step calls, we take alcohol with us to try and stabilize people who are in psychosis, right? And that's what happened. I accidentally 12-stepped myself in that. I drank that and I was knocked out of psychosis. And I woke up the next day feeling like hell, hungover, but it was a familiar place for me and my body and my brain and there was no gang that was after me. I was just a regular stupid alcoholic, and that I was 50 miles away from everybody that loved and was worried about me, and I needed to get help. And step 2, which says, in 12 and 12 step 2, my favorite line, and then I woke up, and that's what happened. I woke up, and I was outside of an Alano club in Mission, BC, in my car, and I woke up and I was desperate for a cigarette, and I knew that if you can't bum a cigarette outside of a 12-step meeting, you have no skills at all. And I went in there, and the lady said, are you here to get into the valley? And I had no idea what that meant, but it got me a coffee and a cigarette, so I said, sure. Well, the valley was Miracle Valley, which was a treatment center outside of Abbotsford, BC, and by saying that I was here to get into the valley, I was admitting to having a serious alcohol and drug problem. And, we talk about higher power being cunning, baffling, or disease being cunning, baffling, and powerful. Well, so is my higher power. I figure I got tricked into admitting it because guess what? I haven't had a drink or drug since then, right? That moment, when he said, are you here to get in the valley? And I said, yes. That was the end of it. I didn't know that was the end of it. I didn't know that 11 years would go by and I'd be talking on a podcast with, 3 people that are locked down in Baltimore about this. I didn't know any of that. All I knew is that she asked me a question, and I said, yeah, sure, yes, that's exactly why I'm here, to get into the valley, right? Well, I got into a treatment center. I got into, when I said yes, it's here in the valley, she said, okay, Les, we'll be here in half an hour. Well, okay, Les, whatever. Well, Les is a drug and alcohol counselor, and the valley was this treatment center, and Les got, it took Les maybe 10 minutes to figure out that I was, out of my mind and living in my car and in a lot of danger, and not from some invisible gang, but from myself. And he got me into a homeless shelter, and a few weeks later I got into King Haven, which is a treatment center, and I was there 70 days, and then I still had no place to go, so then I moved into another treatment center in Vancouver called Together We Can, and Together We Can had a bunch of second stage housing that went with it. I lived in those houses for about 3.5 months, and then I stayed in a friend's basement for a couple of weeks, and then by that point I had a year of being sober, and I was able to move to Toronto and get on with my life in recovery. And, since then I lived, in Toronto for 6 years. I had the opportunity to move back here. My daughter, who's, 25 years old, is, I get to see her like once a week. We have sushi, and I've been able to, she's into holistic nutrition, and so she's, able to, tell me which vitamins I should be taking or what, high blood pressure is associated with, and all sorts of stuff like that. And, I get to just one day at a time, not, to hurt anyone and sort of be of service. And, and I still go to, these little, 12-step gatherings, 5 or 6 times a week, even now when we're on Zoom, which is, better than nothing. It's not, I wouldn't say that it's as good, but it's, not. And, I was just sharing today that progress, not perfection. When I took my 5-year medallion in Toronto, they do them every 5 years, and I engraved on it, "What's the point?" And the point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. And that's where I am today, is I'm willing to, accept that I don't have the answers, but I do have a solution. And the solution is relationship with a power greater than me, and the opportunity to share that experience with other people, and be okay with that. It's just, just fine. So that's my story.
All right. Awesome. Well, we definitely have some questions for you. Carly, would you like to lead us off?
Sure, why not? So you talked a little bit about how you hit rock bottom in 2009, so talked a little bit about the physical part of it, psychosis. If you can think back, what were your thoughts and feelings like during that hitting bottom?
Rage. I was very angry. I did not want to be an alcoholic. Terror, mortal terror. It was. When I think back to that time period, all I can remember is the dark. And it was, it was late fall in Vancouver, so it was pretty cloudy and dark. But there must have been some light. But I swear to you, I can't remember any lights during that time. So a dark, scary, confusing place, and the only power I seemed to have was to be angry.
All right. I got a question. Going back, more to the beginning of your story. I related to it a lot when you're talking about having really traumatic events happen in your childhood, and then I had to deal with a lot of traumatic stuff as well. And me personally, a lot of my using was really self-medicating. And so what detrimental effects showed up in your active addiction from your self-medication, and how did it exacerbate your post-traumatic stress?
Well, it's interesting because before I got sober, I was diagnosed with and treated for testicular cancer. And when I asked the doctor, what caused this, he said, well, we think it might be something in the environment and stress and bad luck. Really? Bad luck? That's your science? But when I look back at how I was not, you don't have to be Freud to figure out that I had issues with masculinity to get testicular cancer. Cancer went at my boy parts, right? And so, I can track it all the way back to my grandmother was mad at me because I was a boy. She had been a very bright person who had all opportunities growing up taken from her because she was female. And all the boys in her family got to go on and whatever, get education and all that sort of stuff. And she had to try and make dinner. And there I was, this little boy that had inherited the world. as far as she could see. And so, so somehow I made that connection between the fact that she was mad at me because I was male. And if your grandmother hates you, how much of a piece of shit must you be, right? Your grandmother's supposed to dote on you, right? Not hit you. And so then the self-loathing that manifested itself again and again until the point where, I mean, not to turn this into a show about cancer, but the reality is that, like, people say, oh, you're cancer-free, and I go, well, no, and neither are you, actually. But anyway, because cancer is just an umbrella to describe mutant cells. And we're producing millions and millions of cells all the time. And some of them are shitty. And so, but we have an immune system that spots them and takes them out, right? And they're going, you're something wrong. Oh, and either that or they're shitty cells that can't really reproduce anyway. They just die off, right? So our body's going through this all the time, rejecting cells, as we speak. However, if you are taxing your immune system with stress, alcohol, smoking, all these sorts of things, then your immune system is distracted away from that little mutant cell over there that is able to reproduce and is, not obeying any of the rules of your body and is able to molecularly grow. And and you can look at that from a physiological perspective. You can look at it from a philosophic perspective or a spiritual perspective. But there was something eating me. There was something in me that was not at peace. And because I was distracting it, my natural ability to take care of that, whether that be a relationship with, a loving God or smoking too much, it was allowed to fester and grow. And, and so, when I look at my own, the harm that I sustained and the trauma that I sustained, it was like a mutant cell. And because I was using alcohol and drugs and, porn and, all those things that we do to distract ourselves from our feelings, those feelings just turned into, in my case, a tumor, and also in my case, a inability to handle my feelings. And so using drugs and alcohol became, as we say, alcohol was not the problem. Alcohol was the solution. And that is deadly, right? And it did almost kill me. I mean, testicular cancer is 95% cure rate, which is not 100%. And so, it was fully determined to take me out, right? And, but for some reason, either the government of Canada or, my higher powers, some force was saying, this guy is not done yet. Because, again, the cancer treatment happened before my alcoholism, because ironically, that incredible capacity, that lethal tolerance that I had for drinking was wiped out by the chemo. And suddenly, chemo kills everything, right? So I had very, very strong chemo, because that's how they treat TC, is because, they can cure it, but they throw the book at you. Anyway, you get a whole new set of organs, and those ones didn't have my Irish given tolerance of bourbon, and now I did. Now I was drunk, and people could see it, and I was drunk on 3 beer. Now I still drank the other 9, but now people are going, "Oh, Rick's messed up," right? Yeah, and so. If you look at the timeline, that in February 2008, I was diagnosed with cancer. A year later, I finished treatment in August. I was given a sort of a clean bill of health in September, right? By December 27th, I hit bottom. So we're just it was very, very quick after that. And to my family's credit, I guess, they didn't worry too much about the cancer because, my brother's doctor, he knew that wasn't going to kill me. They were worried about the alcoholism because they knew that would kill me, And that's there's something ironic about that because, I spoke to a group of medical students in Toronto, and, I said to them about addiction, and I said, people get cancer, they go, oh, cancer, right? But they, he's talking about alcoholism, they go, well, whatever, right? The reality is that, with my cancer, and this is what I'm still, in treatment for, you say like after 5 years, they're going to do a big check on me, and they'll see that maybe there's something that's come back, and maybe they'll try to intervene, they won't be able to, and it might, finish me off. But it takes a couple of years for that to happen. With alcoholism, I could be dead before the sun rises again. And that's how imminent and pervasive and underrated addiction is. The 4 people on this podcast right now are not guaranteed another day with this thing, right? And so my efforts to share my story, my efforts to show up for my meetings, I have to, talk to my sponsor and be all part of that is keeping me alive for another day, And, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but a colleague of mine was new in the program, and he had gone out, and then he was back, and he was dropping me off, and I said to him, I don't need to be too dramatic about this, but your life is in danger. And every time he shares, he brings that up, because that killed him. That some comedian pal of his could tell him, I don't mean to be a weirdo, but you're in danger. And, he's like, and there was no, punchline.
Yeah. All right, Eric, what do you got?
You just glossed over it. And, when you were talking there for a second, so I really like first I'm just going to say I really do like what you were just talking about, the process of, how you go into remission for cancer and you're going to have those annual checkups and to make sure that it's still in remission, where addiction isn't really like that. And I don't know, I hear the cancer analogy all the time, and for some reason the way you phrased it hit home a little bit more. But you talked about different parts of unmanageability in your life, and you mentioned porn, which is a bit taboo, and it isn't quite talked about as much as I think it should be. So I guess, from what I I guess the question here is, how have you used principles from recovery in other areas of your life to, get a handle on the unmanageability and powerlessness of other manifestations or behaviors of your addiction?
Oh, wow. Look at the big brain on Eric.
I know, he always gets the good questions.
Well, yeah, as soon as I said that word, I realized that I had lit a fuse in the back of the room, and we didn't know how long that fuse was. But the reality is that I spent 1.5 years in SLAA, which is Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and there's And it's ironic to me. I don't know if ironic is the right word, that how giddy and foolish and silly we seem to get when we talk about sex in recovery, even though we know that it's extraordinarily destructive within the life of an addict. And, we have buried more than a couple of our friends who got into a relationship and I have a joke about it in my act. Periodically I say that, step 13 is not a step. It's a tradition.
So good.
Yes, thank you. But more specifically, what I mentioned was porn, and porn is a specific, particularly devastating erosion of our young men's souls. You know that there are 16-year-old boys that are having to use Viagra, right? I mean, when I was 16, I needed a pill to not be hard. And so we know that something's wrong there, right? And when our very basic function of the notion of our own sexuality is being sabotaged by this pervasive, and it's free now. I mean, like my first experiences, we found, Playboys at the dump, and they were, they were rain soaked and all this kind of stuff, and you took them back to the fort. Now, you one click, you can, click on your phone. I could be watching it right now. I'm not, by the way, but I could. And so, and so I think for me, the question you asked, Eric, and is how do you use those principles in all your affairs? And here's a little something that's kind of interesting. In SLAA, the 12th step is not, they don't say practice principles in all your affairs. It says practice principles in all areas of your life, because affairs were part of the problem, right? Mm. And so I just think that's an interesting adjustment that they needed to make. But the reality is that a relationship with your higher power is, and becoming spiritually awake is how it works for me. And for me to realize that like that, I had a piece of tiramisu 6 months into my the recovery, rum-laced, Italian dessert, and I can taste that forkful now, right? I dropped the fork, but my brain went, hey, and that's what porn does, is that it seeps into your brain, and suddenly, one of the things we talked about in SLAA was groping people with your eyes, right? Standing on the program, right? And that phrasing, groping people with your eyes, because there's no pleasure in it. There is no pleasure in you looking at that young woman or that person that way. There is, you're not feeling good about it. They're not feeling good about it, right? And if you, have been on some porn site half an hour before, you can't help it. Your brain is already wired that way. And so for me to be, healthy and be able to, be a good lover to my partner, I have to abstain, right? Because she will never meet up to this, faceless, sort of videotaped prostitution that porn is, and so out of respect to her as a person, and more importantly, as a respect to my own recovery, I have to go, not going there, right? And because it allows my brain to rest, and then when I look over at her and she smiles at me, right, my heart goes pitter-patter, not, some debauched sort of orgy scenario. And it doesn't lower your standards of sexuality, it raises them. And that's, I think, an important notion to see, that we, just like when we were drinking and we thought, how are we ever going to have fun without drinking? And now we realize, alcohol would make this shitty, right? That it would not make things fun. It made them not fun. It made family dinners a disaster. It made birthday parties, you were late and made an ass of yourself, right? It didn't make it better. And so all these forms of, and for me, to be very specific about what my perspectives are on this, is that porn numbs me out. It takes away that, that the feeling, but it doesn't make the feeling go away. It just puts it, it tables it for the next discussion. And if I'm feeling lonely or hurt or misunderstood or unappreciated, then the best thing I can do is feel that. Like, my sponsor says, if you're feeling lonely, feel it. That, like, where do you feel it? What does it feel like? It's kind of headachy and hungry, and it's in the front of your face, and there's all these sorts of things. Meanwhile, while you're, delving into the experience of the feelings of loneliness, somebody comes up and starts talking to you, and you go, dude, excuse me, I'm trying to be lonely over here. Right?
That sounds like me.
And so, yes, no doubt. And so the same thing is with alcohol and drugs and shopping and eating and porn. They're all just a way of avoiding feeling our feelings, right? And the unmanageability that talks about in step one is our inability to handle feelings, right? But the point is that we don't have to handle them. They change. They change when, and I guess, I can say to, my partner struggles with smoking, and I'm like 9 years, not smoke, so you know how annoying I am to her about that. But we were on the beach, and she said, "I just need a break to, I said, "Oh, you need to go smoke." She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, just ask God for 15 minutes more without that." And so she did, and then that feeling passed, and it was like, an hour and a half later when we were walking home that she had a third of a cigarette, right? So, if we acknowledge what we're feeling, we go, not right now, God, I just can't, then, and you won't be surprised to know that God goes, okay, I'll send a bird to sing at you, or an old lady that needs help at the door, or a phone call from someone in recovery that needs your help. Every time I have this thing called the 3 Ps: pause, pray, proceed. And so if I'm walking down the street and I see someone enjoying a pint at a patio, this is not recently, but anyway, and I think, well, that looks like I wouldn't mind one of those. I stop, pause, and then, and then I proceed, and I keep going. And every single time something happens, I get a phone call from somebody that needs my help, or there's, some natural experience, some bird sings at me, or I notice how, the flowers are blooming, or whatever it is, whatever corny thing God comes up with to let me know that, that you're fine, and that impulse has been put in check, right? Because we're all like a couple of weeks away from our next relapse, and if I let that fester, if I smell some weed and I go, maybe I could still smoke weed, if I don't nip that in the bud right now, it's only going to get stronger, so that's, anyway, that's my, what was that question about porn?
Yeah.
Anyway, just, it's one of the things that I learned in treatment is that my counselor was a porn addict, and he was Mormon and had like 6 kids, and it didn't make any sense. And what he did was he wrote down every time he had an impulse to look at porn, he made a note of what he was doing and what time of day it was. And what he found was that when he was on his afternoon break and he was checking out the sports scores on his internet, that's when he had this impulse and he realized that the sports pages that he was looking at always had these scantily clad women in the ads, right? And so he had a couple of minutes off to himself, and he was on a site that was luring him in, and he was able to arrest that impulse simply by monitoring when and what, right? What time of day and what he was doing, right?
Nice.
Smart guy. Anyway, can we talk about my movie?
Yes, we can. So
Yeah.
we're gonna, so I'm on your IMDb page right now, and
Okay.
before we talk about the movie I know you want to talk about, what is going on with Corona?
Yeah.
I see that Corona is a completed project. Looking at the premise right now, since we are all kind of like in a quarantine, do you want to shed some light on that as well?
Sure. Is there a picture of me with a huge swastika on my head?
I saw that on your Twitter page, actually. Yeah, your character looks like a bag person, kind of.
Well, that's a real insight you're showing there. Again, Eric, that's amazing. I'm playing the Corona was developed very quickly. A guy named Mustafa Kazari. His longtime girlfriend is Chinese, and so back in January and February, when the coronavirus was starting to become a thing, and it was all the speculation was that it was coming out of some market in Wuhan, and he found that people were being racist against his girlfriend, and so he wanted to explore that idea. And I was cast. I'm a professional actor, and so I knew someone in the woman who played the pregnant woman in the story was also the casting director, and she asked me if I'd be willing to do this. It's a super low budget movie, and so it was just I didn't have to audition. I just went in and did that, and he kind of wrote the part for me. Oddly, he initially had the idea of a dying old man in a wheelchair, but he met me, and instead, because of my sort of voice and my sort of robust bearing, and at that point this very large beard, he changed the role to be someone who was more of a biker and racist. You know, the movie was about racism and about people using xenophobia as a way to, under the idea of protecting themselves from this disease. And when, and the premise of Corona is that fear is the virus, right? Or fear of the other is what's spreading. And so I represent almost the personification of that fear. And, it was, the film is not released yet. It got an enormous amount of publicity because it being the very first Corona movie, because we shot it in February 14th, while we could still sit around and crammed into elevators making movies and eating off each other's plates and all sorts of things that we had no idea would not be, safe. And we made this movie, and he, because we shot it, basically it's a one-shot movie, which means that we shot it a bunch of times. I think we did it about 100 times in 20-minute chunks. And so every time the power went up on the elevator or whatever, then that was a cut. And then we would either reset and do it again or move on to the next thing. So we shot it in 2 days, and then we all went home. And then, 2 weeks later, we were all shut down, and Mustafa was in the New York Times and the Hollywood Reporter and BBC and the London Examiner and all sorts of Middle Eastern papers. Just an incredible amount of, and the picture of me, because when I went in to do the scene, the makeup girl had a bunch of faux tattoos that she put on me. I have one. She put another half dozen on me, and then painted a large swastika on my forehead, which is a fairly easy symbol to recognize. And so every one of these papers has a photo, and there's an old Rick with his big beard sitting in a wheelchair and this massive swastika on his head. And because it was so, strange time period, people are getting a hold of me going, are you, has something happened to your ideologies? I'm going, if you want to put an end to KKK, put me in charge of it. So no, I was acting. And I have a rough human form of humor, and so that really worked well in the story as well. Is that I was kind of funny, but I was also, sort of a bully and a racist and all that. So nobody will miss me in that story. And that just happened, boom, right? And all of a sudden I'm sitting in lockdown, and people are sending me, news clippings from the New York Times, right? Or as your president calls it, the failing New York Times. Anyway, yeah. So I realize it's not your president and all that, or maybe it is.
So
I wouldn't say that, but
So Richard,
try and fix that, will you?
What?
Try and fix that presidential problem you have, will you?
We'll see. Hopefully.
Okay.
So Richard, let's talk about the movie that's going to be released soon, right? And that's kind of your documentary. So just give us a little bit of information, about. I mean, I watched the trailer. What was the process for developing this film? I mean, it looks like you have some archival footage, and just kind of go through that.
Well, I didn't do any of it. I just was him. Roy was a young man when I met him. You have to understand this movie is like now 10 years from when it started, right?
Okay.
At its initial, it was, premiered at a couple of film festivals, Whistler and the Just for Laughs Film Festival. And and at that point, it had been 9 years in the works. So now, Comedy Dynamics, which is a massive distribution company, is distributing it on Amazon Prime and I don't know, another dozen or so streaming platforms. However, what happened was that I was drinking and being the party animal that I was, and Roy was a young guy, and Danny, who you spoke to, and he had been sort of a video guy around Vancouver, and I figured that all I really needed to rescue my, floundering comedy career was a good video of my show. And so I got a hold of Danny. He said, I'm moving to Toronto, but I do know this kid that has a camera, and he's a fan of yours, so maybe you want to talk to him. So I got a hold of him, and then we agreed to meet, and Roy will never let me forget that I stood him up. The first meeting that we were supposed to have, I didn't make it. And then I did actually check out some of his stuff online. I went, oh, this guy's not a complete idiot. I will meet with him. Arrogance and entitlement are my two major defects of character. So if you're surprised by that, you're the only three. Anyway, Roy and I got together, and partway into this conversation, in the middle of the sentence that I was saying, he said, I want to start filming you now. I said, what do you mean now? He says, I want to go to my car and get my camera and start filming you now. I went, oh, okay. So we got his camera, and that night I got kicked out of Yuck Yucks, the comedy club I was working for. And that night, and then the following day, then it just was, spiraling into the bottom. And he filmed it all. And we had an arrangement that he would be the filmmaker and I would be Richard Lett. And so he never showed me a frame of this thing, right? And he shot it for 7 years. And followed me all the way through hitting bottom, all the way through losing my apartment, all the way through disappearing for a while, and then resurfacing all the way into the treatment centers, and then into the recovery, and then eventually I ended up writing and performing a one-man show called Sober But Never Clean, and touring with that, and that's when he came up and filmed the process of that. And my mother's calling me. I'm gonna have to send her. She won't be able to take the message. Can you call me back later? No, she'll never get that. Anyway, she'll leave a message that will be heartwarming. And anyway, she's 90, and one of the reasons that I'm determined to lecture people about not socially distancing and all that stuff is because I really want her to make it to 91, which will be in June as well. Anyway, point is that it was a fluke. Documentarians are specialized in getting lucky. And that's what happened with Roy, is that he started shooting this thing, and then the film happened. So, and I didn't care, right? I mean, I just was dying. Turns out, if you see the trailer, you can see how far down I go. And I didn't really even realize that. One of the journalists that saw the film before I did, because again, I didn't see it until it premiered. She said, well, I guess the next thing would have been for you would have been death. And I went, what? I didn't know I was dying. I didn't know how close I was to not, and when you see the film, even though I'm the guy and I know that I live, there's still a feeling when Roy's going to see and film me again that you're going, this guy's going to be like dead on the floor when he goes next time, right? And that is the nature of addiction. I don't think that, any of the people that died during the time period that it took us to make this podcast, even in my town, let alone Baltimore, they didn't think that this was their last day. They didn't know, and I didn't know that I was dying. And so but Roy just kept on filming it, and then he ended up growing up and becoming a skilled and accomplished filmmaker, and moving to Los Angeles and employing all sorts of people and getting all sorts of sort of high sort of fancy editors and people to help him and turn it into a very good movie. I mean, Comedy Dynamics doesn't distribute films that they don't think are any good, and they're not doing it to help people with recovery. That's known. They don't have a recovery agenda, and so and so what he did was kind of miraculous in that, and it's interesting when you watch the film because as time goes on, the quality of camera and film and everything increases. So the movie goes from a very gritty, almost, like cops-like, film style into this sort of beautiful cinematic piece. And it's all based on the fact that his talent as a filmmaker and the quality of equipment over that time period. If you imagine, from 2010 till now, the quality of the technology and the increase in that time has been, huge. So watching the film, it just becomes more beautiful. And as I emerge into recovery and into the light, I saw it twice in Whistler. When it opened, and it was like sort of wow, holy shit, man, that all that sort of stuff. So the first time it was shocking and disturbing, and it like was, and then the second time I watched it, I went, this is a good movie. He's really created it's strange to have a movie that's about you, but it's good, and and it's human, and it's funny, and it's scary, and it's and the one of the reviewers in Vancouver said, and it has a Hollywood ending. If Hollywood would get their endings right, so that was very, very interesting because it's not and now I'm a famous star, right? It tells the story of a journeyman comedian. And for me, when I watch documentaries, I find it way more interesting for real, to have stories about real people than to, see how, whatever Daryl Hannah got, or whatever that guy's name is, how he found his way, right? Celebrity stuff, And the interesting thing about the movie is that I lived, and the film's credibility hinges on my continued sobriety. If I was dead or drinking, then people go like, well, whatever. I mean, when you watch the Whitney Houston documentary, you can't not see her dead in the bathtub in every fucking scene, right? As much as what's, wow, she really could sing. Wow, that was her, but it still ends badly. It is and there's many documentaries that people have tried to make about people in recovery, and filming ended prematurely and badly, right? the real testament to this film was Roy's determination to stick with it, and to be completely immodest, my determination to, be in recovery. Because as you know, it's no cakewalk. And, it's a daily challenge. So it opens, or it airs, or what do they call it, launches June 16th on Amazon. And it is, available, pre-sales are available on Apple and various other, and maybe iTunes or something. I don't pay that much attention to it. I mean, I do, but not enough to be able to sell it the way that Danny or Roy could. Because, there's no money in it for me. It's not like, you don't pay guys to do documentaries. That would be wrong. That's not how that works. And on the other hand, maybe I'll get a gig out of it. I don't know. But I do know that already it's helped a lot of people. And that's what floats my boat. That's what, that helps. That is what keeps me in recovery, is the opportunity to help. And the enduring sort of thing about Never Be Done is the hope that it provides, right? When people watch that and they go, well, he tried and he succeeded. And he didn't succeed at becoming rich and famous. He succeeded at becoming as they say in that crazy book, man among men, worker among worker, friend among friend, right? It doesn't say Academy Award winner among Academy Award winners, right? Because if it did say that, then Robin Williams could have made this film, or Heath Ledger could have made this film, or all the litany of people that we've lost, who had it all, but didn't have, Philip Seymour Hoffman, all these people that just, couldn't do it. And the world of comedy is full of them as well. I can't, I mean, it's like when you think of Mitch Hedberg, sure, you can handle off a few of his jokes, but it's really hard not to see him dead in a hotel room from a heroin overdose. I would rather be a washed up, comedian working the conventions and fundraisers for recovery and die an old sober man than be rich and famous and leave a legacy of addiction. So, but I would love lots of people to see the movie, because it would be nice if Roy could get some of his money back, because, it wasn't free.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
if we... So, anything else?
No.
I just have...
Oh, go ahead, David.
I just have one last question. So, what are some quick warnings you could give to anybody out there that's in recovery, in show business? What advice would you give to them?
Probably one of the most important things that I learned is about being right-sized. Sometimes I would do shows when I was early in recovery, and I was still doing, and I was actually doing comedy, and the audience would love it. There'd be cheering and laughing, and everyone loved me. And then my colleagues would ditch me to go off and drink and smoke pot, and I would be left alone, and I'd be back on the streetcar, headed out of there and feeling like crap. So it'd go from way up high to way down low. And so what's, important for me is to not let myself get too high on how awesome I am. And that protects me from going too far down when I get lonely and hopeless. I said to my daughter that I thought that if I got a big movie or was in an important festival, that might impress her. And she said to me, "Oh, that's what you think impresses me. Interesting." And I said, "Well, what does impress you?" She goes, "Well, you beat cancer and you are living in recovery. So when people ask me about my dad, I can say, he's a poet or he's a comedian or he's, or also said what I don't have to say is he's dead or he's a drunk." And, that my daughter is impressed with my ability to find good sushi restaurants and my willingness to sit in coffee shops and listen, right? That's what humans do. And so the idea of that these Dust Glass Festival or, all these things, have any meaning at all is just ego. I don't, of any story of any person on their deathbed saying, send this video to, Just for Laughs, or phone Visa, I think I can make another payment. What we crave at the end of our lives is just another moment with the people that loved us, and maybe the opportunity to breathe, the sea air or see a sunset or all that corny stuff that actually is what it's about. If this virus has shown us anything, it's that all our stuff means shit, right? Like we're all leveled. We're all on an equal surface now, right? When you see Stephen Colbert in his living room or Seth Meyers in his attic, right? And you see they're just doing the same thing as we are, right? Mm-hmm. They got dogs and kids and good sweaters and bad ones, and that's really what it's about. So if you want to be a stand-up comedian, if you want to be in recovery and also be in show business, you have to be able to accept that that stand-up comedy is a drug, and attention is like a bump on the back of the toilet, and you have to be careful about that stuff. My show Sober But Never Clean talked about stand-up comedy being my addiction, right? Mm-hmm. And we can become addicted to all sorts of things, but when it comes down to it, the things that really matter, right? If you can be honest with it, what really matters is that when I get off the phone here, I'm going to phone my mom, right? Yeah. And she has a son that she doesn't have to worry about. She has a son that worries about her, right? That wasn't always the case. That wasn't always the case. So sometimes my mom will say, "Can you talk to my friend because her son is alcoholic? Can I, and maybe you can tell her and help her?" And so, well, I can, Mom, but the person who has experience with being the mother of an alcoholic isn't me, it's you. You're the one that can carry that message to her. That message of hope, right? And so, the way I handle clubs, the way I handle it all, I just, I don't want to be too corny, but I just pray. I pray that my words be of service to the people that hear them. But when I'm doing a big convention or doing a fundraiser and I've got a moment, I don't think I'm going to be able to pull this one off, or everybody before me was way funnier than I'll ever be, and all that sort of stuff. I just take a moment, I would say the serenity prayer, and then I just ask, just let me be of service to these other people. And it flies.
Love it.
And just a bit of advice, when you're walking into that club, say hello to the doorman. Say hello to the people that are there with you. Because just because your picture on the wall doesn't mean that God thinks you're more important, right?
Yeah.
And stay connected with the people around you, because they're all God's beautiful children, and they deserve hello, how are you tonight? Right? Just like everyone else. Okay. Any other ones?
Oh, I think that's about it. Mm-hmm. Got anything else, Eric?
No.
Eric. I don't want to answer Eric's questions.
No, that was great. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, all right. Well, we would like to thank our guest Richard for joining us.
Woo! Yay!
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me. And watch out for that documentary, June 16th on Amazon. Never Be Done, the Richard Glenn Lett story, and have me back on your show to talk about it once you've seen it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, definitely will, man.
Okay.
Well, you have a good night, Richard.
Okay, thank you. Night.
All right. Here at Podcast Recovery, we are aiming to expand the scope of support for recovering addicts. Accessibility and convenience of helpful services is paramount to combating addiction. We work to bring the message of recovery to every addict, wherever and whenever it is needed. We believe that a powerful voice of recovery should be obtainable, practical, and at the touch of a button. Every addict deserves to hear a message of hope, and Podcast Recovery is here to provide it. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us, and definitely thanks to our guest, Richard, for joining us all the way from British Columbia. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube for more information about Carly, Allie, Eric, and myself. Go to podcastrecovery.com and certainly check out his new movie, Never Be Done, which will come out June 15th, I believe you said.
16th.
But most importantly, everybody out there, stay 15th?
16th. And everyone, before David signs off, we do have a Patreon page. So if you guys do feel the need to, throw a few bucks our way and support us, think of it as the seventh, tradition. Think of it as a basket to help us maintain the show with different maintenance cost and recurring fees that come up with hosting and equipment, etc. But David, go ahead. Do your little sign out.
Most importantly, everybody out there, stay safe and stay clean.